This is essentially the talk that you should listen to when you turn 70 or approach that age, or when you retire. There are so many stages in our lives where everything we were falls away and something new comes in. We've all passed through some of them, and they were pretty specific. The leaving childhood was a hard one, but most of you probably don't remember it too well. But it's not fun, and you fight against it. You fight against having to take on responsibility, having to become an adult, or at that point really how to become a responsible child. And suddenly there's school. Suddenly you're being graded. You're being found either wanting or very capable. You're discovering yourself all through this journey, and some of it is quite wonderful and some of it's very painful. And then you become a teenager and deal with all of that. You no longer have to just make your parents happy, you got to make all your friends happy. And you can't. And so you start choosing friends that will support you. And then you have to find a lover, the one person who will be committed to you for the rest of your life. And that's not easy. And then you have to do the career thing. And the career thing is something we're driven to, most of us. In a very funny way, we're driven to it by our hunger for accomplishment. Elijah, my grandson, is unbelievably proud of his ability to stand. But even more happy that he gets applauded for it. And he wants the next thing, and the next thing. And actually, so much of our worldly accomplishment is based on wanting to be acknowledged and appreciated and approved of, and somehow to measure up. And we're measuring up based on what used to be considered the approval matrix that our parents gave us, and then our friends gave us, and then it's your boss gives you, and the world gives you, or whatever it is. And some of us measure up okay, a lot of us don't measure up. And then we have to live with that, because then the real measuring stick becomes the one inside us. And when we find ourselves wanting, we come to a sense that we need to do something about it. So, there's only so many choices. Chocolate, psychiatrists, liquor, watching a lot of TV. Mostly it's distraction. Distraction from the pain of not being who you wanted to be, measuring up to what you wanted to become. And then there's meditation. And there's different ways of approaching meditation. One of them is to become everything you can be, and the other is to escape who you are. And a lot of people who meditate are trying desperately not to be themselves and feel freedom in that. But it's a kind of a dangerous place, because it's using meditation in completely the wrong way. Real meditation is engagement, and I'll talk about engagement in a minute. But engagement is engaging the self, not getting rid of the self. And this is all a series of stages, and these are ways we grow. We are going toward something. What are we going toward? What is it we're looking for in this journey, in which parts of us fall away and new parts find themselves coming into being? It's a really good question. I don't think many of us have an answer. I think the thing you probably most want in life is to be at peace with it. Just to be able to accept it as it is. But we don't have a lot of language for that. And we don't exactly know what it is, and very few of us find a path to that. So much of our path is misguided by the desire still for approval from others rather than approval from yourself, or even the ability to give up approval altogether. How can you get to the place of real arrival? The arrival at whatever it is you think you're looking for. And of course, nobody ever does, because the thing you're looking for is inexplicable. You may get happiness for a few hours or a week or a month, even a year or two. You may get serenity for a bit. All of these things are arriving and disappearing, almost not simultaneously, but as a continuum. Stuff comes and it goes. And this idea of impermanence, which is at the core of sort of Buddhist teaching, is really a truism in our lives. So all of our struggle to get something ultimately fails, because once you get it, something in you knows you're going to lose it. Everything you get, you're going to lose. And even though your mind doesn't want to deal with that and does everything it can to distract itself from that truth, there comes a point where you turn 70, or whatever the age is, where you retire, or whatever it is you do, that starts to let go of everything you've been working toward. It's like you're building and building and building and building. The old idea of he who has the most toys wins. There's that idea that if you can have the home you want, the children you want, the marriage you want, the career you want, everything you want, you will finally have arrived there. And then as soon as you do arrive there, if you do, you realize you have to retire and you're going to die. They're going to take it all away. And there's a sense of enormous betrayal in all of that. Even though you were told from the beginning this is how it works, even though you knew this is what was coming, you don't want it. You don't want the sense that you have to ultimately give up what you have worked so hard to get. It's very painful. And it's a strange kind of dichotomy, because you've been programmed to get all this stuff, and nobody's programming you to let go of it. What do you do about that? There's no teaching for it, really, even though it's inevitable. And so you arrive at this age of 70 or whatever, retired, and you start to have a completely new dialogue with all of your friends who have arrived at that point. You start to go, what the hell is this? What now? What have we arrived at? What has it all meant? What does it mean now? Where are we going? Really interesting. My friend Larry went to the doctor the other day, and the doctor said, you know, you're going to live to be 100. And all he could think of is, what am I going to do? He has 30 years approximately, and there's no kindergarten, there's no school, there's no job, there's nothing. What's he going to do with 30 years? That's a long time. And, you know, it's really interesting. As you start to move toward that process, another thing comes into play, which is you no longer feel safe. Safety as an issue starts to dissipate, because you know there's only one way out of this process and this period. And it can come at you in any moment from any direction, inside, outside, whatever. You may suddenly find this whole thing over, done. And so this lack of safety, which you might call existential angst, begins to rise up, and mostly the reaction from a lifetime of being on this planet is, do not look at that. Do not look in that direction. It's only going to get more problematic. Play golf. Go to the movies. Thank God for episodic television, you know, and for big books and whatever it is that can keep you looking anywhere but there or here. Rudy said this practice that we are in is a life's work. He said it to me day one. He said, and if you decide to do this, you have to be prepared to do it for the rest of your life. And I always talk about how horrible a thing that is to hear on day one, because none of us commits to anything for a lifetime, except breathing. We don't really commit very much at all because it's too big an issue. It's too grand. How can you do something for the rest of your life? And but I said yes. I don't even know why I said yes, but I said yes because I knew it was true. I just knew it was true. And now that I'm getting toward the end of my life, or whatever, maybe 30 years, my friend Larry is a lot healthier than I am, but whatever I have left, I have begun to grasp, and grasping may be the wrong word, to understand why this is really important work, especially as you get toward the end of your life. Because it is the one practice that allows you to find the path from this world into the infinite, from this world into the eternal. You can back into the eternal, you can stumble into it, you can get blasted into it, you can try to say, oh, if I pray and pray and pray, or if I'm a good person, and if I give money to the synagogue and the church and the mosque and do all these good things, I will be elevated into the eternal. But that's all part of your own mind's lack of truth. I mean, not that that doesn't help on some level. Living a good life will make transitions more will be easier, than, let's say, than if you live a life of duplicity and greed and doing dark deeds. That's not going to be an easy passage. And and we've been taught that by every religious treatise that's out there. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's really a pretty powerful teaching. But here we are, 70, and everything you have been working toward and for is suddenly gone. And you go, now what? And you really, literally have to reprogram your life. Volunteer work. Take up painting. Go back to school. Meditate more. Learn how to play the piano. I mean, there's all of these things, and a lot of people say, wow, now I have the opportunity to finally do what I've always wanted to do. Which is great if you have spent a whole life doing what you don't want to do. I'm one of those unfortunate people who did what I wanted to do my whole life. And it was really wonderful. And now I don't have it to do. I can continue doing it on my own and may well do that, because that's what I do. And also, there's so many interesting things that happen. Life happens. You wake up in the morning and stuff arises. The email comes, the phone call, the need to babysit, or the desire to babysit, to go shopping, to go get your glasses fixed. Whatever it is, suddenly your day gets like, ooh, my day is full. How did that happen? In the old days, I went to work, I went shopping, I went on a date, I did all these things you do and your life is full. Now you have nothing to do and it's more full. It's unbelievable how powerful the demand of just being alive becomes. But it seems, when you get to be in your 70s, less purposeful. And there certainly is less applause. Not a lot of people are saying, boy, you were great at the doctor today. They don't do it. And your parents are gone because you can't get that anymore. Many of our parents are gone. And your children are not around to do that. They're not going to applaud your existence. And your spouse will probably not applaud your existence, usually. It's really wonderful when they do. But you have to really earn it. So here you are, 70, and you're a meditator, like me. And then I've had this, I don't know how to call it other than the awakening. This awakening took place And the awakening that took place, and I've talked about this a lot, was that Bruce suddenly was no longer, excuse me, available at the core. Bruce was like a manufactured creation that suddenly evaporated. Now, I know you look at me and say, there's Bruce. And I know I look at me and I go, there's a lot of Brucing that takes place all the time. But the lack of that as your central issue is a fascinating experience. And it is, in some ways, considered the goal of spiritual practice. If you meditate long enough and you find this spaciousness inside yourself, this beauty, this joy, this vastness of being, and finally the spark of containment, the part of you that said, I have awakening, or I have this, or I have that, disappears. And in truth, the awakening is the loss of that which owns it. There's no one there to have it. And so you finally end up arriving at a place that I describe as a place you've always been, that all of us have always been, and you're there without the you that supported it. Now, again, that you still plays within this. It's like I was talking about people who meditate to escape themselves. That won't do it. Meditation is to be yourself and to discover yourself. And what you discover when you meditate is that by wanting to escape yourself, you're trapped in the self you're trying to get away from. It is always there as a torment. Once you accept yourself, open to yourself, embrace yourself, the self suddenly goes, and you realize that what you are is not this little person, but this vastness of being in which that little person exists. It's an extraordinary discovery for all of us. And it happens. And it happens before you die or when you die. But you suddenly understand you were never this tiny little thing. You were the vastness of being in which that little tiny thing played itself out. For whatever reason, and probably for a very important reason in terms of the universe's needs. It's hard to know. But there it is. There's this little self playing itself, doing whatever it does, and then suddenly there you are in your vast self. And you think, and most people believe, that the goal of meditation is to arrive at the peace that surpasseth understanding. And I can only tell you that may be true. My experience, and I document my experience because some of you may go through this on your journey, is that the peace that passeth understanding comes and goes. I have yet to arrive at permanent peace. So, those of you who suddenly hear that and feel, get me out of here, why am I sitting with this guy? If he hasn't gotten permanent peace, why am I here? I completely understand. Go find the teacher who has. Be in their presence. I have found that which is full of peace and full of struggle, full of joy and full of sorrow, full of light and full of dark. It is the complete yin-yang of existence. That's all I can tell you. If something happens in the next however long I'm here and I'm able to speak about it, and that thing that happens is some kind of final resolution into the land of bliss and joy, I'll tell you. And for your sake, I suppose, I would hope that might happen, because I don't want you to feel you're wasting your time here. On the other hand, there's something very powerful about arriving at what is. There's something very powerful about yin-yang and being at one with that. I call it, and I don't know if I'm labeling it properly or not according to the larger theologies, but I call it the absolute. And the absolute is everything. And what you arrive at is everything. And what happens in my life is fascinating to me because of the learning curve that I'm on. The lack of, or the loss of the personal individual self is, as I said, not the end of the journey, it is the beginning of the universal journey, if you will. And your experience of life is no longer through the filter that has your name on it. You're just imbibing life. It's coming at you. And some days you wake up in a state of ecstatic gratitude. And some days you wake up wishing you had slept more and better, wishing that something didn't hurt, because almost every day I wake up and something hurts. You know, I don't, more and more as I get older. And you kind of go, what's this about? But not that you really question it, because as your body starts to go, it hurts. And you're going to find more and more and more discomfort. And that's no fun. And then some days, and I'll describe this to you because last week this was one of the hardest weeks I've ever gone through. It's actually like 3 days of profound suffering. It was profound, not Bruce suffering, it was just suffering. I called it existential suffering. It was enormous. It was unavoidable. I could not escape it in any way that I could find. There was no one to talk to about it because it's hard to share something that is so inexplicable and overwhelming. And I'm going, I thought I was past this. I thought I had escaped suffering of this magnitude, and there's no reason for it. There is no way to describe it. And at the other side of this unbelievable suffering is remarkable horniness, unbearable horniness. And I'm 70-something years old, you know, that kind of sort of 16-year-old passion, fighting with this suffering, and this, and there's nothing that understands it really. You know, it's like I thought I had worked my way past all of this. And so I had to sit with it, and you sit with it, and it doesn't go away. You just sit with it. And there you are, and I'm trying to get it on some level, and I do. Something comes through and says to me, and I said this the last time I was here talking, remember Buddha under the Bo tree. Buddha sat under the Bo tree, and in the end of his sitting, he was assaulted by all his terror and all of his everything that could seduce him. They were pulling in both directions. The most beautiful forms imaginable in the world, material, physical, sexual, pulling him one way. The abyss, pain, suffering, eternal damnation, all of that on the other side. And they were just grabbing him, and he just sat there. He just sat there because there's nothing else you can do. It's so powerful. You just sit there, and it just keeps at it. And then finally, and I don't know if there's a finally, you look at it and you go, what is this? Excuse me, I'm using my seat. You go, what I did, this is not me and this is not mine. This is ours. This is universal. I do not need to own this. This is atmospheric, if you will. It is like a storm passing through. I just got that message. This is not the ultimate permanent anything. It's just happening. But its happening was vital to my understanding of my own psyche. And it did. It did exactly what I'm describing. It passed through. And when it passed through, it left me a much humbler soul than I had been before it started. Because I realized you cannot escape what is. You cannot escape the magnitude of what is. I also understood that, in a way, this kind of storm was part of what we call global warming. You know, what's happening atmospherically outside is happening atmospherically inside. And that the drama is bigger, it's greater. We're all very aware of the planetary forces at work right now, at least the drama that's being presented from them. And this internalized becomes part of who we are. It's who we are, not filtered through Bruce, but just there. It's just there. And as you arrive at 70 and retirement, you are going to have less and less to distract you from it. It's going to just simply be there. It's sort of deathbed-like. On your deathbed, you don't have the future anymore to say, well, when I get there, it will be fine, unless your mind projects heaven or hell. The immediacy of deathbed experience, of usually the suffering of it if you're awake, is so powerful that there's no future. The past is kind of eradicated on some level. You're just in this thing. And the drama of dealing with that thing is essentially informed by how you lived your life. If you're facing this drama for the first time, meaning that you were successful in completely distracting yourself from the truth of life for your entire life, then when you suddenly come face to face with truth, which is in the suffering and the joy and the sexuality and the beauty and the horror and all of that stuff, all happening at one time, if you have never looked at it before, it's a very big thing to deal with. If you have lived your life in a state of practice, as Rudy said, sitting your whole life, when this arrives, you have at least prepared on some level to meet this situation. You have had practice at sitting and facing the abyss, facing nothingness, facing beauty, facing truth. You have been there. And something in you, in a very deep and very powerful way, knows how to surrender to it, to let go, to give yourself over to this thing, to, if nothing else, know that it is temporal. Even at death, it's temporal because it's going to be over. But it's a big vision. It's powerful. And we are all headed toward that. Every human being is headed toward that. My LSD experience of the 1960s, which I don't always like to reference because a lot of people say, yeah, drug experience, but my experience of that period was that I went over to the other side, and it was shockingly big. If you think this life is big, that journey beyond is even bigger. And what you bring into that transformation is the journey you're on for a long time. So if you bring terror and fear and what is going on, you will have a very long journey of dealing with that. If you bring to it, thy will be done, or just surrender, it's a different journey. It's the same journey, but it's approached very differently. And I will tell you, the journey of life is this long. The journey afterward is billions of years. I don't know if you can get that on camera. It's big. And this is short. This is timeless. This is time. And learning how, in time, to deal with the infinite eternal self is what you're here for. That's why we're here. So if you have been here for 70 years and never dealt with any of this, when you hit 70 and your career falls away, and nobody's calling you to ask you to do this or do that, when people look at you as past tense, when you look at yourself as past tense, when you wake up in the morning and go, you got nothing to do, now what? It's a very new ballgame. And in that ballgame, you either have the ability to sit down and go, this is the opportunity to truly be one with what is, or it's the opportunity to take a lot more classes. It's kind of your call. But it's an opportunity to really start to finally embrace that which you can no longer look away from. The whole idea is come into focus. Find yourself. Find what this is. You know, it's the life progress. It's built in. The opportunity is built in for all of us to come to see who we are, where we are, what this is. And not to do that is to avoid the whole reason to have been born in the first place. Being born gives you an opportunity to consciously connect with your true, infinite, and eternal self. That which has always been and always will be. That's the journey. But you have to engage that journey. If you don't engage it, it won't come into focus for you. There are lots of ways to engage it, and it doesn't have to be meditation, by the way. It can just be living a conscious, loving life. It can just be following the Ten Commandments. Honestly, that's all that's required. You don't have to do this. You can just be a good husband or a good wife and a good parent and a good person at work and take care of all live your responsibilities and help other people along the way and express kindness and all of these things, and you will find your way moving to the door to the infinite with great simplicity and ease. But if you are lost in this journey, if you are totally consumed by goals that you can or cannot meet, you will find yourself in the end betrayed by the wrong goals. They don't add up. They simply don't add up. You can't buy yourself into completion, to satisfaction. I don't care how many homes you own, I don't care how many castles you inhabit, whatever that is, it all disintegrates. It completely disintegrates, and you're still there without it. All there is absence. Absence. And if you're trying to find what is, you have to find what is there when the absence occurs. And what is there when there is nothing is everything. That's the great discovery of all meditative experience and of living. That what was important all the time was being, period. Being. And one thing that does not get taken away, ever, and I tell you this with what I would call certainty, even though I don't believe in certainty, but what gets taken away is everything but your being. And being is infinitely present. I don't know how it works. It's a mystery to me on every level. But being is all there is. So the one thing you want to find that's true and real and will always be there while you're in this world is being. You want to find that you are. And the fact is you already know it. You already feel it. You're already living it. But you just haven't settled into it because you're still caught in the personal drama that encapsulates it. Surrender, surrender, surrender. Let go. Open. Relax. Take a breath. And there it is. There it is. It's always been there. And it feels welcoming. It feels beautiful. It embraces. It says yes. Find that space. It's the essence of you. And yet, it is also the yin and the yang of you. Don't expect it to always be one thing or another. It will be what it needs to be. And your openness and willingness to accept it in its totality, in its absolute nature, is what ultimately brings this liberation that you're looking for. It's the yes to what is. That's the journey we're on. When you're 70 and you turn on this recording, if you do, it's just a reminder that life has stages and you are at that stage of letting go. You are at a stage where everything has to be reconfigured, where you have to take a new level of responsibility for not being distracted by everything and finding your way into the truth of your own being. This is what we're about. This is what we're trying to do. This is why you sit your whole life and meditate. It's why you bring this consciousness to your life, because it's all leading to the awareness that meditation brings you. This is our journey, everybody, and we're all on it. And the fact that you're in this room is that you're open to knowing it. And if you're not in this room and you're not paying attention to this, you're going to be surprised when it all hits you. This is a way in. It's a way to learn. It's a way to be prepared. It's a way to have a rich life while you're living it and not having to wait to be surprised by what life is at the last moments of your existence. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Bruce, it's funny, every once in a while during meditation, if I'm drifting, I'll go to the Buddha under the Bo tree. Because seeking inspiration there. And the thing that occurred to me, it seemed, I'm so surprised it's taken 20 years to have this question. But the question that came to me today, when he was working on the yin and yang of it all and dealing with that which is the critical moment, all the pull and all the darkness, and then there was this moment of, I guess, realization, of pure awareness. Was it a realization understood, with the mind intellectually, or how did, in your own experience, what is that moment? Is it an understood moment? Is it a felt moment?
It would combine all of the above. I mean, it's not intellectual. I mean, it wouldn't satisfy if it was intellectual. You go, oh, that's interesting. It's not. It's a full-bodied awareness. It is based on the awakening experience. It's an extinguishing of something that is trying to contain, that's trying to hold, grasp, know, understand. All of that lets go, because it's incomprehensible. But I believe that you see it all within a larger context that is so vast and so real and so much more embracing than you could ever have imagined. And all of the light and dark is playing out within this thing that you are. And then suddenly to be able to be that diminishes all these other forces. They are containable forces. They are not forces that limit you. They're not forces that define you. They are forces that are playing out within the vastness of this one absolute truth. But it doesn't mean they go away. It means they have a different relationship to your universe, to your being. You look at it and you go, ha, ha. Now, I don't want to speak for Buddha, okay? And I really do feel, and many people have described this, that awakening and enlightenment and all of these processes are levels almost. I don't know that there's one final blip. I mean, very possibly, and if what Buddha described is that blip, then you're I guess you're kind of done. But you're not done, because you've got a body that's still sitting here, walking through the day, and you're aware of that body within the bigness of things. And its temporal nature, that it's not going to last long, it's going to ultimately decay, ultimately cause some kind of suffering, and ultimately cease to be. But you also know that when that happens, you will not cease to be. But it doesn't eliminate that process. And how you deal with that process will probably be informed by the larger vision that you have of existence. But what I refer to, and I know this now is boring because I've said it 1,000 times, Christ on the cross is not enjoying his suffering. He doesn't enjoy it. He would give it away in a second. Nisargadatta, when he was dying of throat cancer from having smoked his whole life, wished he had never been born. These are guys who, vast beings, sitting there suffering and going, why me? Well, not even why me, because they know why, but they're suffering with that kind of feeling. And it's horrible. On the other hand, there's a part of them which probably in that moment isn't vibrantly alive, which is connected to the totality. And at some point, Christ, in the middle of his enormity of suffering, has compassion for those around him. And that compassion, in my mind, means somehow the enormity is starting to push through. And he goes, oh yes, oh yes. And he looks at the insanity of what's contained in the middle of all of this vastness of being, and he forgives it because it is so ignorant of what it is, so uncertain of what it is, that it can't help but give into the yin-yang, the beauty and the horror of existence. beauty meaning the incredible nature of creation, and horror meaning the destruction of everything that's beautiful. You know, happening all in the same ballpark. It's an amazing drama. And when you're in the suffering of it, it's very hard to appreciate the vastness of it. But when you do, then you look back at all of this and you go, oh, even the horror is beautiful. The whole thing is totally amazing. And Christ arrived at that moment. I assume Nisargadatta did. I assume all of us at some ultimate realization arrive at that moment where we just go, aha. Not that it gives you the sense of, I get it, because there's no I to get it. I am it is a closer expression. I am this. I am the horror and I am the beauty. I am the creator and I am the destroyer and the preserver. I am is the only truth you sort of get. And that's what I think Buddha under the Bo tree got. You know, I always thought in my early spiritual journey that at one point I would get it. And I would have my Bo tree experience. My thing now is that, no. How do you get this? I mean, I literally walk around outside and I go, what is this? I don't know how many times you do that, but who made this? You know? It's like, what? It's so extraordinary. It's so beyond understanding that this came into being, that I get to know you. How did I get to know you? I love you so much. How did that happen? I don't know. You know, it goes on and on and on. You know, and I watch the news and I get horrified by the stuff I'm seeing. How did that happen? Why would anybody want to kill another human being? Why? And all of this stuff goes on, and yet there's this part of me that goes, aha, I am that. I am that. And it's a potent understanding. You know, and you don't know what to do with it, but finally you just don't do battle with it. You just go. I mean, look, I could write books about why this needs to be just like it is. Why the universe needs to construct itself through these opposing forces. That without the opposing forces, there would be no building blocks for matter and structure, and we wouldn't have a world to live in with which and through which to recognize the magnificent mystery that we're in. It needs to build itself to reveal itself. And here we are in that process. And it's so extraordinary. And yet, here we are. I thought I was free of it, you know, free of the I don't know, the drama and the suffering, and there's not at all. It's still going on, and I'm going, okay, this is a bigger lesson for me. And I have to say, in teaching class today, the bigness of it had multiplied. It had multiplied because of what just happened last week. I don't understand how it magnified, but it did. And so I'm going, thy will be done. I'm on it. I'm in it. I mean, I can't escape it, neither can you. So we're all in it. And, you know, I don't know if we'll know exactly what Buddha saw under the Bo tree, but you're going to discover what Andrew discovered under the Bo tree, and I'll discover what Bruce discovers. And we may find, as I've said in the past, that Bo tree is not a single sitting, you know, in the middle of India. You're under the Bo tree day and night for your whole life. That's all this is the Bo tree, figuring it out. Yes?
So in reflecting to what you just said about the Christ and his passion and his death and all the convolutions that took place, then somehow the gift was salvation. So if I reflect the salvation, meaning that my performance is already put aside, and who I am one with the state of grace and peace and equanimity. So if I have that belief within myself, I go through the struggles and obstacles that present itself and be able to act accordingly with peace. Because I'm already having that sense of the manifestation that I'm already, a sinner who is in a state of grace.
I think that's, the reason that Christ came into the world was to save us. And what you're saying right now is exactly what you would want to have someone say who understood Christ's teachings. That's exactly the right answer. I don't know if that was clear for people on the tape, but the idea that, we are already saved, that salvation is what Christ gave us, and that having believed in that salvation leads you to it through the suffering that is inevitable. It's the path to salvation being a good word. But not necessarily salvation of you as a person. It's the salvation of, it's the recognition of the infinite and the eternal, which you already are, welcoming you back into its embrace. Anyone else?
As I say, we talk about that a little bit when we talk about being a child, and then that point when you start to identify with things and become separate, and then you begin to release that again, and it's pretty similar.
It's a process over and over and over. You know, we each grow up into something bigger and bigger and bigger with more responsibility in a sense, and then ultimately we have to let go of it, whatever that is, into the next stage. And the stage you're going into at 70 is very different than any stage you've ever been in before, because it no longer has accomplishment as part of its goal. It no longer has, affirmation on any level. It's completely different. And it's like, how do I engineer myself through that? And you're learning and you're learning and you're learning. And I thought learning was done. It's actually a whole new stage of remarkable learning that nothing in a way has prepared you for, although in a sense everything has prepared you for. It's really powerful, powerful series of stages that we go through in terms of human life.
Isn't that part of the social programming too? Meaning if you didn't know people died, then you wouldn't probably have the fear as much?
Yeah, probably. I mean, that was the whole Buddha thing. I mean, Buddha had no idea people died. When he was young, they kept that from him. And then he finally went out there and saw it was happening, and it changed everything. He said, what an illusion I've been under. That gave him a whole new sense of how this works. Getting exposed to truth of aging and suffering and dying is really that which informs life. Because we're all headed there, every one of us.
But if we, like you said, if we didn't see death as such an awful thing, we saw it as a release in some capacity, then there wouldn't be that fear either.
Well, that would be great. I mean, and that's what Christ was trying to teach, and I think a lot of teachers try to teach, and it's very valuable to people. But my feeling, and forgive me because I know this is complicated, but I don't think we should take it on faith. I think we've got to discover it for ourselves. I think taking it on faith is fine. It probably works in a way, but I think we have to come to it through our own journey, actually. And I think that if you're walking around in a state of certainty because somebody told you this is how it is, you haven't begun the process. You're still following somebody else's affirmation, but not your own. And it's not healthy on some level. I mean, it might, if it pays off in the end, maybe you were able to hold to somebody else's truth and it freed you. But that journey of holding to that truth probably is a good drama in itself, because a lot of things challenge it as you grow. And learning how to embrace and own your own truth is kind of what our ride is all about. Charlene?
I'm thinking of a couple of things. At the beginning of the talk, you mentioned that when you reach 70, suddenly you realize that you could die at any moment. Or you said you could die at any moment, but it's true.
No, of course. No, I mean, and that's an important understanding. You can die at any moment, but when you reach 70, you got nothing to distract you from it.
And then the other thing is when you were talking about accomplishment, it seems to me the accomplishment is still there, but it's much smaller. Getting up in the morning and making the most perfect cup of coffee you can make and really enjoying it.
Absolutely. That's one of the things you realize. On the other hand, truly, nobody's applauding it. And if you're living for that applause, which I did, and I know my grandson is right now enjoying that applause, my granddaughter is, I'm seeing how built in that is. Nobody appreciates my cup of tea but me. On the other hand, I do appreciate it. I really do. I appreciate anything that flows, the grace of movement itself. It really comes into play. I mean, even today, I had to unfold the wires on here because they're all knotted up. And I had everybody waiting for me, what's he doing? I just said, I'm just going to unfold it. and it was like a weird, kind of lovely little dance of unfolding. And you really come to appreciate that. And much more than that. You start to appreciate every second of what you're observing, assuming you can relax into it and do that. But if you're sitting in existential angst, which is a lot of people I know are doing, they're not appreciating very much of anything. All they want is, the next distraction, whatever that may be. That's what they want. One has to move past distraction. And meditation is, of course, that. Sit still, and stare and look at what is, rather than look at all the stuff that's distracting you from what is. And that's an important practice, I think. And, the great thing Rudy taught me.
I just have one comment. I think everybody has to stop applauding Elijah, and then he won't have that journey.
That's interesting, but you have to kind of tell the culture that. It's not just his parents and not just us, because really we don't all applaud him all the time. But it's an interesting.
Really, the point that I really want to make is, it's a big question. And for some people, unquestioned, are you working for extrinsic reward, or are you working for an internal sense? And I just want to say, I've just gone through that. Life gave me the opposite lesson of yours, which is no applause, no reward. You're going to work and work and work. You don't think your work is ever going to come to anything. So any reward, has been such a surprise for me. And I would and will do it again, Yeah, I mean, because whatever my life karma or journey was, it was not to be rewarded in terms of that, a career and external stuff. And I'm just wondering if maybe that sets you up for a different kind of life journey.
Whatever you do, however you try to program your children or your grandchildren, you're going to get it wrong. You can't. Not giving them applause will have just as many consequences as having given them applause.
I really do.
And but I really think you give what your heart says to give, and they will work it out. We'll all work it out. My mother's giving me applause gave me a career. Honestly, if she didn't say you were a great writer, I wouldn't have been a writer. Even she wanted to support that. So I'm not against the applause. I'm just telling you, whatever you get builds a structure that has to be dismantled. Or what you don't get builds a structure that has to be dismantled. In the end, you've got to take it all apart. And if you don't take it apart, when you're 70, it probably just won't be there anymore. The structure just won't be there. And you'll have to go, oh, now what? And that's a big reconciliation with the universe. That you're no longer operating on old paradigms. Now it's time for a new paradigm, and you had better be ready for it, because everyone I know who's turning that age, and 70 is just an abstraction, it could be 80, it could be 90, and not having the work to go to, everyone who arrives at that has to go through something that's completely unprepared for. And that's shocking when you get there. And some people go, well, now, like I said, this is great, I'll do something else, and other people just sit there going, now what? And so it's an important stage in human development, and it's not in the books very much. Or maybe it is and I haven't read them, but I do know that it's a great time to begin the preparation for what is coming, which is very much embedded in what is. Don't look away. Just don't look away. That's probably the best teaching. Stare it right in the face. Okay? Thank you, guys. Like I said before, I'm going to try to get back here as much as I can, like once a month if I can. So we'll continue this. And if anybody wants to come up to San Rafael and have class, you're welcome to do that. Just check with us to make sure there is a class at that point. And I think all of you got a little letter. If you know anybody up in that area who might want to meditate, let them get in touch with us. Okay? Thank you very much.